Right, I'm just going to show you quickly how I would usually solder a cable that I'm shortening after I've trimmed it down. I usually apply solder to the cable rather than solder to the soldering iron. So you just get the soldering iron, get it warm, and you just touch it on the cable like so. Make sure it's coated, and then excuse me, you do the same on the other one. Heat the cable and then apply the solder to the cable rather than applying the solder to the soldering iron, and you'll know because you can see it soak into the cable rather than just sticking to it. It's always advisable when you're applying solder using a flux based solder, so one with the A-class flux is usually, I think it's A-class flux? I don't know what that says on it. Anyway, so I'm using that kind, quite a fine solder. The flux just helps it run. The other thing is when you're applying the cable to the jack socket, if you're doing the metal on the outside edge around here rather than applying it to the centre pin, or I usually do the centre pin first, then you may need a dab of flux just on the chassis, just to help the solder to adhere to the chassis rather than just floating on top of it and giving you what's called a dry joint later on, which means that it disconnects from the chassis and just flaps about and causes all that crackling you get when you've got a dodgy cable.